Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to our 47th Security Thought Leadership webinar. We've been here every Tuesday and Thursday since the crisis started, examining an issue of topical debate in the security sector. And the idea of thought leadership is that we critique the type of security we get today in order that we get a better type of security tomorrow. And once again, we've got a panel, an international panel, to evaluate a topic that has occurred in previous webinars. And the topic today is looking at the security sector and the harms caused by COVID-19. What have we learned so far? And of course, in previous webinars, this issue has cropped up. Today, by asking our panelists to give their views, different angles from different countries, we're going to be looking at what those harms are and what the impact is. So it's a bit of an elite one, this one, a bit of a special one that is designed to get us thinking about the topics. Now, in a minute, I'm going to introduce the three panelists from Nigeria, from the United Kingdom and from Belgium. And I'm first of all going to ask them each to introduce themselves. And once they've done that, I'm then going to invite each of them to make an opening statement. 3 minutes where we get their views on the issues in question. And once they've done that, I will then come to you for any questions that you've got. So if you want to ask any question, can you please use your question and answer button at the bottom of your screen, and I will endeavour to get to you during the webinar. Try and get in early though, because it gets quite busy. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to go to our first panellist, Matt, and invite Matt to introduce himself. Matt.
Hello, my name is Matt Hopkins and I'm an associate professor in criminology at the School of Criminology, the University of Leicester in the United Kingdom.
Thank you very much indeed, Matt, and doing work on security right now, I might add. Anne, could you introduce yourself first, please?
Yes, for sure. Thank you for the invitation, Martin. My name is Anne Vangelista. I'm based in Brussels, in Belgium. And I started my career 25 years ago and focused these latest 10 years on intelligence for private companies and foresight. So it's long-term strategy. I helped organizations protect and develop their patrimony and assets in the wide sense by deriving actionable insights from observed facts. I worked in different sectors of activity, and namely private security. I wrote a paper on the Belgian private security at the horizon 2030. And at the occasion, I plotted on a map different stakeholders, actors, and drivers impacting the private security sector. And I'm sure we'll have the occasion to tackle a couple of them today. From a personal standpoint, I'm a Krav Maga, which is self-defense system instructor, which just underlines the importance I grant to protection. And I used to compare myself to this Saint Bernard dog. Do you see what I mean by Saint Bernard dog? So the one wearing the little keg of alcohol around the neck that I don't have today, to go and find victims in avalanche.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Anne. And Thomas, can we just have a little introduction from you, please? Tell us who you are.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. It is great to see all you here. Thank you for coming. My name is Thomas Udu. I am a certified corporate trainer, having spent 26 years in law enforcement operation, committed in position of a trainer with ISET. Today, we are here to look at COVID-19 and the impact on security. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Thomas. And we'll come back to each of you for your opening statements now. And Matt, you're first, if you wouldn't mind. 3 minutes from you on your thoughts on the harms caused. Off you go.
Hi, everybody. Well, I think the first thing I'd like to say on this issue is what we are going to witness going forward. I think there's some huge changes in the security sector before I move on to the direct harms to the security sector. I think one of the things we are going to see is, or we're witnessing at the moment, is most definitely that the function of security companies is changing. We're certainly moving from an asset protection role to a policing of public health role, which I think is quite a major shift in security. But I also think the importance of security is going to change going forward. I think security is going to become far more central to a lot of organisations and a lot of large companies going forward. I think security is going to be involved a lot more in planning going forward. I also think we're going to see a greater working relationship between security and policing going forward. But I think one of the downsides of COVID-19 is as the international recession hits, I think we could see a shrinking of the security sector. But I think there's going to be a slight contradiction here in that I think security is going to become more pivotal and important as organisations going forward. But I think we will see a slight shrinking of the sector. In relation to direct harms to security, I think a lot of the direct harms are being felt at the moment by those on the front line. I think there's three ways which this is being observed. I think first in relation to death rates, and medical data around this, which has been published, particularly in the UK, where we're seeing death rates, we think about 46 per 100,000 in the security sector, those on the front line. And some associations have been observed here between various risk factors such as age, ethnicity, and gender. I would say I think a lot more work needs to be done around this in the future to tease out what's driving those relationships, and we need to be looking much closer at proximity and exposure factors to COVID-19 for those working on the front. I also think as well, we're seeing greater risk of violence victimisation for those working on the front line, as COVID-19, I think, has produced a whole new set of potential trigger factors for those working on the front line. And this has been evidenced by the death of a security operative, Calvin Mulligan, in the USA, who was just asking to wear a mask, a face mask, and he was shot. I think there's a lot of research to be done around why security might on occasion be struggling to get people to comply with COVID-19 regulations and simple things like wearing face masks. But thirdly as well, I think there is an issue around staff anxiety, which needs to be looked at in some detail. How anxious are security of going to work? Are they anxious at all? We know in security the culture of masculinities, it's a male-dominated profession. Is it here that security tends to be fairly bullish about dealing with these sorts of issues? And then finally, in relation to good practices that can be followed, I think there are a whole host of good practices that can be followed in security, following World Health Organization guidelines, trying to communicate risk well, I think is a really important thing we need to be doing. We need to be providing appropriate guidelines, ensuring that we're using personal protection properly, providing training to our frontline workers, and also importantly, listening to our frontline workers as well, and security operatives. What are they telling us about what it's like to work on the front line? And if they are being affected by working on the front line in relation to anxiety or the greater risk of violent victimization, are we listening to them and what support are we giving them? And I always think as well, I think of what Paul Martin said in The Rules of Security, in that good security is intelligent and proportionate to the risks. I think all we can try and do at the moment as a sector is to try and be intelligent and as proportionate as we possibly can in the face of what is some really quite conflicting and difficult evidence at the moment.
Thank you. Some very, very interesting points there, actually, and plenty for us to pick up on later. Thank you very much indeed, Matt. And your opening statement, please.
So I took it from the PESTEL approach. So in other words, political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal. So to start with, from a political point of view, well, security professionals are perceived as the armed wing of the politics, and they are also the first point of contact of the citizens to impose actually unpopular measures. So like in a customer service, they are the only reachable person to complain about the situation. And they also seen a change in their job tasks, because most of the time they operated at place where they had to restrict freedom and perform new types of tasks, like imposing to queue at shops, to wash hands, to use a trolley, to come alone doing shopping, to take temperature and potentially refuse entry, and to wear masks properly. All of these restrictions were accepted the first weeks, but rapidly generated reluctance, discussions, hostility to end with verbal and physical aggressiveness. So remarks were frequent, like you're not a police officer, touching actually the legitimacy of the private security actions, or you're not a doctor, touching the legitimacy of the medical protection methods. So security professionals had to impose measures also they sometimes themselves did not believe in, and they suffer from a lack of proper guidance to tackle the societal aspects. They suffer also from contradictory information and difficulty to speak with one voice for politics and experts. And in some cases, different sanitary measures conflicting. From an economic standpoint, private security sector, of course, suffered from a downturn in activity with the shops closed, the events cancelled, and the cultural world at a standstill, without saying about the airports. And according to the French expert Claude Tarlin, in France, the turnover loss for the security sector amounts to 30 to 50%. From a social perspective, with this pandemic, we see that the first two layers of Maslow pyramid were shaken. So the physiological needs like food, water, sleep, breathing, and health, but also the security needs to start with. And after a while, the other layers were touched too, like the lack of social interaction with family, friends, or colleagues. Plus, of course, people having potentially lost their job and feeling no more belonging to the society. Moreover, all the segments were not equally reached, with population that was not properly informed, as communication channels were not enough diversified. But all those impacts, of course, on the citizen also impacted security professionals, and they had to cope with their own feelings and the one of the citizen. Some of them talking about conspiracy theory as well. From a technological standpoint, there were new issues to face with an evolution in the crime types. Indeed, for the cybersecurity professionals, this COVID-19 period generated JIGA work, and we might have the occasion to come back on this a little bit later. And from a legal standpoint, the legality of a series of decisions to be applied by security professionals, like temperature taking or track and tracing activity, was almost systematically questioned, adding mistrust from the citizens to the already existing reluctance. From an environmental harm towards security professionals, I must admit that I did not find anything, but if you do have ideas, please let us know, they are welcome. Thank you
very much indeed, Anne. That was some interesting points and a nice framework to guide our thinking. Okay, Tom, so if you've got a question, please use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. Get your question in early and we'll endeavour to come to you. Okay, Thomas, bit of noise in the background there, but let's see if we can hear you. Thomas, your opening statement, please.
Yes, I think it's because of the network is poor here.
Okay.
My opening statement: security officers or professionals have been particularly vulnerable in the COVID-19 pandemic, especially. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. So carry on. So if you could start off about security officers again.
Yeah, I say security officers have been particularly vulnerable in the COVID-19 pandemic, especially as they begin to take additional rules and responsibility that often put them into further lines of attack. For instance, a security was beaten in an argument while trying to enforce a face mask order. Security officers have been called to take temperature of visitors, coming into the facility or worker to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, which puts them in close proximity to people potentially infected with the virus. In Nigeria today, the issue of equipment is also a challenge, which to some extent is also a problem for the security professional. How are they being trained? How are they being structured? What is the governance guidelines, specifically as they now work from home? What are the rules guiding them? Apparently, because you want to relate with other workers as you are still in the office. So all of this is putting a challenge, to the security professional. Today, as I speak, in Nigeria, we have confirmed about 53,000 confirmed cases, and also actual cases about 11,000, discharge about 40,000, and death 1,010. Sample taking is just about 388. And we have a population of about 2 million. Now, the essence of this small statistic is that it is difficult for security manager to be able to recognize who has a COVID-19 at the time he is trying to provide IC, because many of them, don't display the symptoms. So the impact of COVID-19 is unprecedented and offer a very difficult terrain for security professionals, especially if they do not prepare because of this type of a pandemic.
Thomas, is that you finished?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the big issues actually, that proximity to frontline workers, and I know that in Nigeria the personal protection has been an issue. Well, let's go to the questions, because partly on the back of what you said, I mean, Matthew Porcelli, who's based in the United States, has asked, how do we introduce young security professionals into this new COVID-19 culture, especially when they are doing frontline security? Matt, I'm going to come to you first on this. I'll come to all the panel on this issue, because it's one thing to talk about security being more important, as you did in your opening statement, Matt, but it's hard to see how it's an enticing job on the front line for the reasons all three of you stated. Indeed, the points Thomas raised are also true in other countries too. Matt, do you see that part of the realities of this is security is going to become less attractive to our most talented people wanting careers in the future? Matt Hopkins first.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Oh dear, it's $1 million question. And in part of my opening statement, one of the things I was kind of trying to get to was, is security going to be a desirable occupation in the future? Look, I think the way we make it a desirable occupation is by continuing the professionalisation of security, making it an occupation which is professionalised, where the pay is competitive. I think is very important. Like I say, I have no doubt, I think security is going to become more and more important in its functions to companies going forward, and I think that will be recognised going forward. But I agree, I think we have a job on our hands to make it an attractive profession. I think we can do it by putting those sorts of things in place. And I think as well, a really important thing about security going forward is the role it has to play in public reassurance, which is another central role which I think a lot of people might find that quite attractive as well going forward. It's going to move away from being a kind of muscle occupation to having all sorts of different, more nuanced roles going forward. And I think that could start to attract different sorts of people to the profession.
Yeah, okay. Anne, I guess your thinking about the future becomes particularly relevant on this one. This is a big deal for the security sector. There's been lots of initiatives going on around the world about attracting the talent, the best talent into the security sector. Do you see COVID-19 as putting a major stop on that transition, on that ability to attract the best people? Anne?
Well, I would say no, actually. I think that what is important really is to talk properly to each generation and to talk differently. So if we take this generation Z, so which is also called the C generation, so people born between 96 and 2009, so they are called the C generation because they, for communication, connection, and collaboration, they represent 40% of the global population right now. And it appears that they are the most likely ones to suffer from mental health issue. And they also have a specific approach to life, like any generation, in fact. And I think that it's very important to go and find them where they are and choose the right, let's say, strategy and influence way, cognitive bias, for example, to get them into the place, and they would play a nice role towards their own generation, and maybe probably better weapons to talk to the young people where it was much more difficult during this COVID-19 period for dinosaurs to imagine where we could find them. For example, the right use of channels. So Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat, or TikTok, and not using the let's say the usual broadcasting on television, calling upon different, not calling upon the right messaging brought to them. So yeah, I think that's it would be important, and they have a relation to the world which is also a specific, wishing to repair actually what has happened in the world, that is probably due to our generation and the one before. And they want to find concrete solution. Would it be to pollution, climate change, and also probably the insecurity feeling?
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Thomas, let me come to you. Matthew Porcelli, who asked the question, is quite a leader in the young security professional world. And of course, what you were saying might well be considered to be, and I think what you were saying about Nigeria applies to other countries too, could be seen to be off-putting, in fact, to work against the interests of attracting people to the security sector. Do you see that being the reality in Nigeria, or can you find some optimism like Matt and Anne? Thomas?
Yes, I think one of the cardinal issue in Nigeria is that the pandemic has also provided an opportunity for security officers to shine. Because even in supermarkets, they want to hire a security guard who could enforce the preventive activity in terms of enforcing force march, and also using the thermometer to temperature. So it is growing, and despite that there's a few challenges here and there because of the lockdown, but after the lockdown, I think as a strategic leader, the security in Nigeria is improving. And that is why you see the employment in that sector is also growing. So as it is now, every supermarket, every organization, and all some of these entities that do businesses want to hire a security guard. So in that aspect, it is a question of the security sector taking this to be serious and getting them, to be well trained to be able to understand how security work and embed them in the culture of security practices.
Yeah, okay, that's quite positive. Well, all three of you found some positive comments in that question. Matthew, I hope you agree with that. Let me come back to all three of you with one of the main reasons why we wanted to hold this webinar. And Matt, you picked up on it in your opening statement when you spoke about, on the one hand, the opportunities that the security sector has got, and on the other hand, the forthcoming economic hardship that's going to result. And there is this view that's cropped up in previous webinars with, don't get carried away with the progress you've made now, security sector, because when the economic cuts come in, what we do know is security is one of the first to go. So it's naive to talk about more training and more focus and more professionalism, because the real world factors are in a crisis, security shines, in a recession, it goes back into the background. And that's what's going to happen here, some are arguing. Matt, your thoughts on that, please?
Yeah, I think there's two ways I can respond to that. I think number one, I could say that's very old school thinking. Or number two, I could say, okay, I appreciate the economic realities of the world and security might go. I think looking at the absolutely fantastic job that I think that security has done generally and showing its resilience over the Covid-19 period so far, the way security has generally organised itself, I think that lots of companies will realise the importance of security going forward. They'll realise the importance of security, not from the old asset protection role that security has traditionally played, but this really important public health function that security is going to play going forward. And this is not going to go away. This is going to be with us for some time to come. And I think security is really going to be central to what a lot of companies want to do. So I kind of stand by my view that there might be a shrinking of the sector, but I think the sector is going to become more and more important to organisations. I think lots of organisations will realise the importance of security going forward for that public reassurance, dealing with the public and dealing with this pandemic.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, this point that you've made, Matt, about the fact the role is changing, and that's the point of difference. And you also mentioned this in your opening statement, okay? And it's been a big issue in the past. There've been some very strong views that whatever gains you feel you've made now, history says the same story. Economic cutbacks means security goes into the background. Crisis over, security goes into the background. There's a short-term memory. Do you think, like Matt, the fact the role has changed here is going to be enough to sustain it? Or any other points you might want to make? Anne, your thoughts on this?
Well, I think there is a convergence between human and digital security, namely with the use of CCTV, ANPR, or drones. And I think that the role will indeed evolve to a more probably digital role, and that it will be needed. And if we think about the future, well, like this pandemic, which is, according to me, what we call a black swan, so something, not a black swan, sorry, a gray hippo, it's another animal. So something that was foreseen, predictable, we just didn't know when it would happen, but it was already on the global risk landscape of the World Economic Forum in 2007. So there are a lot of other issues coming in, pandemics, water crisis, conflicts, geopolitical conflicts. So I think that there is, well, a lot of requests coming for security in general, and that indeed, as Matt mentioned, private and public security probably should play a more collaborative role. And I think that the request is coming also from the public authorities, namely to share information. However, for the time being, the hindrance is also on the legal framework level.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I mean, Thomas, you mentioned that security's had a chance to shine and that it's actually doing a good job and being seen to do a good job. I guess one of the points would be, and I think this is really, what intrigues me about this is when we talk about COVID-19, we talk about harms. And yet what I want to make sure we do is we spot the opportunity, but test out how sustainable it is. Because very few people are doubting, Thomas, that during a time of crisis, security shines. That's what it's about. That's what it's there for, traditionally anyway. The question is, after the crisis, are the changes that are being made now going to be enough to sustain it? What do you think, Thomas, in the context of the fact that you see security being perceived more positively in Nigeria? Thomas.
Yes, thank you. After these phases of COVID-19, organization of security service should be able to undertake post-COVID-19 analysis to see how far they have gone, to see what went wrong, to see what they can do to prevent such occurrence in the future. And that brings me back to what can a security professional demonstrate in terms of value to business. It is because of the enterprise risk management philosophy that has been globally adopted, which means that the function, they have to understand this in depth in terms of business recovery objective and identify current emerging operational risks to recovery objective. So when you begin to look at the post-COVID analysis, you see where you perform low or high. In that way, you'll be able to correct the past. Let me give you an example. When there were Ebola outbreak in Nigeria, security functioned very well. And in fact, everything was perfect. So we are building a system, for the future. So security is really shining in Nigeria, and I believe that. Well, I don't know, because as it is now, the death rate, the infection rate is still very low in Nigeria, either because we are a young population or because of our weather. So it is based on the fact that security will work tomorrow.
Yeah, okay, interesting point. Okay, I want to move on about some of the big harms, because there's been some dramatic impacts on the security sector. In fact, we had a circular today, a report I did with Core Security about the high number of deaths of security officers. Now, Matt, you mentioned this in your opening statement. I was really pleased you did, Matt, actually, because it's a topic that I don't think has been very much at the forefront. And yet, as Thomas says in his opening statement, they're right at they're interacting with the members of the public. That gives them a high chance of they're vulnerable. They're vulnerable. We know a lot of them, disproportionately high numbers of security officers has died. And as you said, Matt, they're dealing with conflict situations. This was already a tricky situation. It's even more tricky and dangerous now. On one hand, I'm tempted to say even more undesirable, but let me not go down that route. But there is a serious harm that's been under the radar. First of all, would you agree that it's been under the radar? Second, why is that the case? And third, do you think we need to do something dramatic to raise awareness of security in particular? Matt, I'll come to you because you raised that first.
Yeah, and I think the data that have been published so far are intriguing. And I've looked at your report on this, which I think is a good piece of work. I think the issue is around all of this. We can talk about proximity and exposure factors, and we've talked about the risk factors to security, such as age, ethnicity, gender, and the fact that many security on the front line are, they're in a routine occupation, often live in areas of deprivation. However, we still haven't really teased out what it is that has led to those high death rates. We've got hypotheses around this, and the research points to some associations, but what is it? I mean, is it dodgy data? Why is it that other occupations with similar characteristics don't seem to have these high death rates? And I think more work needs to be done here. And as a researcher, I always say that. Researchers always say we should be doing more work, but I think we need to be thinking about doing more research. I think more international research needs to be done on this. Is the UK similar or different to other countries? And we need to be looking in more detail at comparative data with other similar types of occupations, to try and tease out why it seems to be that security does have this high death rate.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I'm going to come to Anne as well on this. Every webinar I say, if you want to ask questions, use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. I'm so keen to get the questions that have cropped up from previous webinars. I haven't emphasised that today, but if you do want to ask a question answer button at the bottom of your screen. Anne, I want to come to you on this issue of the disproportionately high death rates of security officers. I mean, Matt's right, we haven't got a good explanation yet, but the evidence is this is a problem. And it strikes me as being largely under the radar. And one might say, well, if it's security officers, of course it's under the radar. We're used to that. Your thoughts on that, on the high level and why it's under the radar, Anne?
Well, I don't have any numbers relating to that, so I will just give, let's say, my views, which are not very scientific. I would say that probably there is, as most of the time, a lack of anticipation of what could happen. Also, probably because we were not aware, a lack of risk assessment and mitigation measures, because actually, indeed, yeah, for other type of professionals, the measure of protections were, I would say better is not maybe the proper word, but they were better protected with glasses or this kind of plastic, and a distance with the citizens. In this case, the contact was well, not direct, but at a short distance, and with no protection between people. So I guess that indeed it was underestimated because we were not aware and we did not prepare for the future with worst case scenario.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Anne. Thomas, would you say this has been true of Nigeria too? I'm just talking about the harms of individual security officers on the front line. So obviously death is more extreme, but is there any evidence there, Thomas? They're facing people who've got high temperatures. You mentioned this. They're facing potentially more conflict situations on an ongoing basis. Are you sensing in any way that they are more at risk and they are more vulnerable as a consequence? Thomas?
Yeah, I did say that security officers are vulnerable because of additional rules, and importantly, because they work 24 hours a week because of the crisis at hand, it seems they are overstretched and stressed up in terms of their judgment. Probably, you want to assess those risks to protect yourself, but because of the fact that you have been stressed out, the quality of your reasoning will be very poor, and in that case, you can equally be infected. However, the issue in terms of family and maybe family work equation is also being challenged, because one person, you are stressing him for many hours, many days, and he alone is always there. That even shows the loyalty of our security professional in the organization. And I do know that the core hour each day when everyone will be available and allow employees to work in other hour at times, fit within the personal crisis management schedule, which this security officer try to manage, because they are always there to ensure that they protect, asset of significant importance.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I've got a question here for Erica Gibbs. She says that when we are talking about security personnel on the front line having a high death rate, we're not including police in these numbers, but she questions the data on which this is based. And of course, fair point, the data is still emerging and the data is still vulnerable. We ought to say that, and thank you, Erica, for the observation. I want to come very quickly because we're running out of time. Matt, you mentioned about the need for training in your opening statement. Now, this has been a biggie. The question is that, and I know Thomas has got a real interest in this, he's a trainer, but the real problem we've got, Matt, is training security officers and those on the front line depends on clients being willing to pay for it. Ultimately, you know, how good a security supplier is, ultimately, the client won't pay. And by and large, the evidence coming through is clients are not that keen on paying for more stuff when they themselves are under stress. Therein lies the real hurdle that seems very difficult to get round. Matt, just your thought on that very quickly, if you wouldn't mind, Matt.
Yeah, well, in relation to COVID-19, we've seen the death rates for security. Okay, we might think there's some dodgy data, but I think if you want security, you have to pay for it. You have to pay for the training of it. And I'm afraid it's part of corporate social responsibility to do this. Those would be my initial thoughts on it. But in terms of training as well, we do need properly trained security on the front line. That goes without saying at the moment.
Yeah, okay. In a few weeks' time, we've got a one on regulation. We're going to regulators and getting their thoughts on this. Panel, we're run out of time. I can't tell you how much I would like to have questioned you more on this. Let me just go to Anne first. And can I just ask you in 15 seconds, Anne, for your final comments, please, your final thoughts on this topic, your takeaway for the audience.
Right, I would say that we need to dedicate much more attention to the context in which we evolve, as we know that the world is VUCA, and this would also allow us to analyze interconnected system and detect trends or detect emerging risks. And then we should go for a longer term strategy, building different scenarios for the future, to anticipate it, not to predict it.
Thank you very much indeed. Very, well, that would be a good guide for us. Thomas, your final comments, 15 seconds, please, if you wouldn't mind. Thomas, your final thoughts.
Yes, I think we need to continue to maintain the existing World Health Organization protocol through social distancing, use of face mask, and hand sanitizer, because the vaccine is not near sight. And if we activate and begin to learn more of this crisis, to equip our security professionals that in times of emergency, and after the emergency, what they are supposed to do, I think it will be better, for the future.
Thomas, thank you very much. Finally, Matt, final comment for you, just 15 seconds if you wouldn't mind, Matt, your takeaway, please.
Okay, obviously, cliche, these are unprecedented times. I think the role of security will change as a result of this over the long term. I think we need better data. And I think we need to listen to what the frontline are telling us about their risks and anxieties. And
thank you very much, Aviva. And I know you're doing some research which will help elucidate that as we go forward. Panel, thank you very much indeed for your observations. Thank you very much indeed always for your questions. I was really keen to make sure we covered some issues today and some real thought-provoking ways forward, I think, in response to this. So I'm very grateful to you. Very quickly, just to let you know that entries for the Oscars are still open in Kenya, Germany, the UK and Romania. Don't forget the Nigerian winners will be announced tomorrow. A bit more about that in a second. And the US finalists to be announced tomorrow. So if you've entered the US Oscars, The finalists will be announced tomorrow, and entries are opening the tech until the 1st of September. Finally, just to say, we're here every Tuesday and Thursday, but tomorrow we've got a special one on Nigeria, the impact of Covid-19 in Nigeria, building on what Thomas has said today, and the presentation of the Nigerian OSPAs. So that's at 11 AM British Summer Time tomorrow. Very unusual to have a Friday one, the Nigerian OSPAs tomorrow. Then on Tuesday, at the unusual time of 9:30, we've got Security in Asia. What does the new normal look like? 4 panelists from Asia talking about Asian security and what the new normal may be like. And just let you know, next Thursday, the 50th webinar in the series, we'll be questioning the role of security associations. Are they a failed resource or a fundamental vehicle for a better security sector in the future? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for your participation. Thank you very much indeed, panel. I hope you are able to join us tomorrow, if not on Tuesday. And until we see you again, wherever you are in the world, stay safe.